True manliness, fidelity, thou ever dost impart, the source of our delights and joys, and happiness thou art. O noble Kappa.
This is an interview of Judge Gerald Bruce Lee by Ethan Brooks. Judge Lee received a Bachelor of Arts degree at American University. He also received a Juris Doctor at American University's Washington College of Law. And through all his hard work, he was nominated to the position of United States District Judge by President Clinton.
Chocolate City for many years. We have a majority white council, I believe, and so it's not Chocolate City anymore. But that's not a bad thing because the suburbs are populated by a very diverse population. I'm in Fairfax County, but Montgomery County and Prince George's County are very, very, very diverse. And Prince George's County, like Atlanta, is one of the largest, most affluent Black populations in our region. So Washington, D.C. is not just the city, the four corners of 7 by 7 mile square. It is really the metropolitan area of D.C., Maryland, Virginia, which you young people call the DMV. I'm sure that attending a predominantly white university was a challenge. I can't say someone called me the N-word on campus, but there were what we call microaggressions, but are indications that you're not necessarily welcome, indications that people presume that you are not as competitive as others. But to go back, if you don't mind, just a little bit, Ethan, I was the first in my family to attend college. And I was not someone that if you met me at 15 or 16, that someone would predict it would be in college at all. No one in my family had attended college. And the way I was able to attend American University because I had a job as a street sweeper in a public housing project in a place called Barry Farms in Southeast Washington. And I worked for a group called Youth Pride Incorporated. And that program, Youth Pride Incorporated, introduced us to an opportunity to attend college at American University. And I was in high school at the time. We took a test. There was about 10 of us. It was about 60 guys. And we cleaned the streets, the public housing streets, Barry Farms, Palmer Road, Goodhoe Road, which is now MLK Avenue. And we got paid. But we did it after school. It was a 3 to 5 school program, but they had an educational program. And we persuaded them to let us take a test while we were still in high school to go to college at American University at night. And here's what happened. 10 of us took the test and we passed. So we got a chance to go to college while we were still seniors in high school. Wow. And so we picked up at the corner of 16th and U, and they put us in the back of a truck and drove us up Massachusetts Avenue. As we ride on Massachusetts Avenue, I see these big mansions and manicured lawns. I said, "Is this Washington?" They said, "Yeah." "Is that somebody's house?" "Yeah." And so that's how I was introduced to American University. So when I went in my first college classroom with my boys, we said, we're going to sit up front. We're not going to sit in the back because we want to make sure we understand what's taking place here. And so it was like an hour and a half bus ride, but we did it. And, you know, after, and sitting in that classroom, I have an experience that maybe you've had, Ethan. You ever gone somewhere and wondered if you really belong? Am I smart enough? Do I really belong here? Well, I had that feeling. And after listening and doing my work, handing my paper, my forward draft, I got an A. And I told my mom, I'm going to go to college. And then I learned, Ethan, if you want to go to college, they tell you it's a good counsel. You got your SAT, right? You got your high school council recommendation. I went to see my high school counselor at Central High School. And I went bopping in, man, with the swagger that I have. I said, "Miss Avery, I decided I want to go to college. I want to go to American University." She looked at me, she said, "Gerald, you are not college material." "Miss Avery, I go to college now, and I have a B average." Oh. And so, Ethan, what do you think that was about? Think it was his brown skin? That's what, you know, she looked at me and made an assumption about what I could do. But thank God I was actually going to college, and so I knew I could do it. But suppose I had not had that opportunity, she could have crushed my dreams. So what I tell young people, and I want you to know this, Miss Avery was right. I was not college material. I was not college material. I was law school material. I was going to go way beyond college and law school, become a lawyer and a judge twice. That's what I was going to do. But she had no way of knowing that. All she saw was dark skin. Inspired. Which I embraced and love.
absolute tenure power without being called out for like, this person is this person has way too much power. We need to get them out now.
Well, let me say that faith plays a major role in my life. I'm a Christian. I began my day on my knees. So I was a judge, Ethan, not the judge. And so I had humility as I took the work on. And I also realized that judges could do more in court and out of court. So in court, I took young people like you, when you were in law school, I had them come work in my chambers. And over the course of 25 years, I had 150 law student interns, many who look like you and many different backgrounds, where I trained them on how to be a lawyer, and I had them do research and writing. In addition, I made them all work in Camp Kappa. Anybody intern for me had to work in Camp Kappa. And there were other programs. We had a color of justice program for high school students where we spent a Saturday in court with young people, and I had all of my interns do that. And the blessing of that work was that I was able to train a generation. So the current Lieutenant Governor of Virginia is one of my interns. Judge Zubery Williams in Montgomery County District Court, one of my former interns. Judge Pamela Berry Evans in Ranco, one of my former interns. Law professors at University of Arizona, University of Baltimore, former interns. Partners in major law firms, former interns. So I was able to, it's like each one teach one, try to train them up and then let them go out and do their work. But I take no credit for their opportunities. I was a talent scout, Ethan. Like I'd hire you. I was a talent scout.
Thank you. While you were a judge, did you ever face any like threats, like outside of the courtroom, if you were in a case and the defendant didn't get their way, like they lost the case in any situation?
There were a couple of threats, but most of the time there were not. I handled some cases that were controversial, involving terrorism, and there were some in the community who thought that my rulings about this case were unfair. And it was a historic case. It was United States versus Omar Abu Ali, who was a young man who was accused of terrorism, threatening to kill President Bush. And we tried the case. The jury returned a verdict, but judges don't pick their cases. The cases come to you. And there were others, but in the main, people who are in criminal court don't attack the judge. They realize they're there because of things they've done. And as long as you treat them fairly and with dignity and respect, and I always did that. I never had really that many, but there were maybe 3 threats over my 25-year career, but nothing that made me have a security detail or people at my house, nothing like that.
This is an interview of Mr. Clarence Nelson by Nathaniel Grant. Mr. Nelson has been in the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity for 52 years. He has graduated from Union Kempsville High School, Hampton University, and the University of Pennsylvania.
So basically, as I've been seeing or doing my research over the past few weeks, the first question is, what was it like in Virginia Beach? And to follow that, what places or things did you go to, like in general, for basically when you're like a small child, like as a teenager, as a young adult, basically in general?
Virginia Beach was like, if you will, the rest of America. It was segregated. It could be mean at times. It could be tough at times, especially to minorities. And Black America, we were the prevailing minority here in Princess Anne County. I can remember several jobs I had. The best job I could get originally was as a dishwasher. My brother, who is deceased, was 3 years younger than I. He said, "Hey, you want a job?" Well, my daddy said, "You got to have a job, son." And dishwashing was the best unskilled labor that I knew. I had cut grass in the neighborhood for several years and made a little money. But at this time, I didn't have a car. Must have been about 15, 16. So caught the Trailway bus into the heart of Virginia Beach, which was full of what? Oceanfront and restaurants. and a couple of clubs. One of the most famous clubs on the East Coast was the Golden Garter Cafe, and it was a restaurant. Of course, we couldn't go there, but guess who ran the kitchen? I did.
When pursuing your careers, or careers like plural, what were some ups and downs, and basically how did it go?
I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. Well, guess what? Chemistry and I did not get along. Chemistry. Now, we all have different talents. Mine was not physical sciences. Mine was not math. So I had to make a decision there. I can be frustrated all my life, maybe get into medical school, maybe not. Or I can do the honorable career that my mother had. And I decided to become a social scientist and dealt with interrelationships, man to man, man to woman, people to people, and go into social organization, if you will. I decided to, well, not decided, it was predestined. I'm going to Hampton. I'm going to Hampton. I asked my mother, I had a football scholarship to Elizabeth City. I called her up after the announcement at the high school sports day. Mama, guess what? I just got a scholarship to Elizabeth City. I think I'm going to Elizabeth City. She got real quiet. She said, son, now you can go to Hampton if you really want to go to Hampton. Don't worry about the money. And where do you want to go to school in your heart? Want to go to Hampton, mama. That's where you're going, son. Get ready. You have to realize that in this world, well, as my daddy used to say, my dad was born 1919. He lived to be 82 years old. He said, it's the white man's world, but we can make a heck of a contribution in it and to it, okay? We all have opportunities. Some opportunities we stumble upon. Those are usually very few. Some opportunities we make. Those are the ones that get you the furthest, those that you are prepared for, those where you are involved, those where you are reading, those where you are taking notes, those where you are pursuing your interests, those where you are asking questions as you are asking me today. This is what makes life important. This is how you can decide and you can determine your own destiny.
What was it like at the Kappa, the 52 years at the Kappa Alpha Fraternity? Were there like backlash, struggles? What happened?
I've been a member. I joined Kappa Alpha Psi April 26, 1969, 12 o'clock noon at Hampton University, the Beta Chi chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi. Kappa Alpha Psi has been very interesting. It gave me an opportunity to express myself. It gave me an opportunity to learn to share, to learn to love another human being as a brother or as brothers. And sometimes that can be difficult to do. That was most difficult for the gentlemen, for the brothers on the line who didn't have brothers, blood brothers. And the whole sharing concept was a little different to them. What's really exciting, I meet a Kappa from California. Never seen him before. Never may see him again. But guess what we've got? We've got a common bond, B-O-N-D. We've got a bond. We've got a bond. Guess what that bond is? Brotherhood in Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated. You and I have bonded already.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah, you're like my little brother. You're like my little brother. Yeah, so it's up to me. It's my responsibility to take an interest in you.
Like in general, how long did it take, like for everything you've done, careers, working, relaxing, vacationing, to get where you are, basically to get where you are, how you're happy, or to get to where you're happy now?
It's taken me almost 74 years to have experienced and to have accomplished what I have accomplished. Now, have there been some bumps in the road? Yes. Have there been some things that I would not have done? Yes. Would there have been some things I would have done differently? Yes. I lost my mother at age 12 years old, and I think about her every day, okay? And I guess I'll think about her until I'm gone home, all right? We were fortunate. My father was able to marry the best woman in the world next to my mother, my stepmother, who was my stepmother for almost 40 years. She lived to be almost 99 years old. She died about 4 years ago. Couldn't have asked for a better stepmother. And from day one, she wasn't stepmother. She was who? She was mama.
Yeah.
Never called her stepmama. She was mama. She provided, if you will, the mother's touch that every man's life needs.
This is an interview of Mr. Gerald Boyd Sr. by Evan Taylor. Mr. Boyd is a UDC and Howard alum and the founder and president of DB Consulting.
Teenager, I served newspapers, work construction. I'm proud of that. I'm conducting, curb and gutter work, drove the Great All, and served newspapers. Even my first year on campus at DC Teachers, I was paid, had a post route, so I had a nice, growing up in the projects in Southeast Washington. Other than the government housing for the most part in Southeast, our neighbors had outhouses and stuff. They grew corn. They had dogs. We ate fresh stuff because you befriend them and stuff. So that was really it. But it was the village mindset. Neighbors discipline you. But back then it was good. I could never use growing up in public housing as an excuse. Foundation. I had great parents, great siblings, and even the peers of my older siblings served as role models for me, always encouraged me to get ahead, to do better. Nobody tried to take me off on the side of the track to do something wrong. So when you hear these guys get up, these athletes who make this money, and the conversation is always about that. Well, he raised by this one mother and blah, 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 and blah, blah, this. They never want to see the positive side. You know what I mean? There were negatives, in growing up, but public housing wasn't housing of last result. You had to have a job to live in public housing. And if you got in trouble, they didn't take you to the police, they took you to the resident manager. And he brought you home. And they threatened to evict your parents if they didn't straighten you up. So that's how you got straight. Nobody had to, put their knee on your neck, So those are my experiences, I guess, as a teenager.
What was it like playing high school and college basketball back then?
When I graduated from Anacostia High School, I had a couple of injuries for broken foot, 2 years. I was the first Black to play tennis at Anacostia, not the first Black to play basketball, those sports, but tennis, because a lot of Blacks weren't playing tennis then. And then I migrated into DC Teachers College, had a pretty good career there, set the scoring record, was inducted into the Hall of Fame, So I had some good experiences athletically.
I know you played for the University of District of Columbia for basketball. How good was that team?
How good? During my time, we were fair. We had to take on, to build a schedule, you had to take on more talented teams.
How did you feel when you got inducted into the University of District of Columbia Hall of Fame?
They started that in 2012. And I think they induct 5 people a year. I was upset. I was in the 3rd class. I felt like I should have been in the 2nd. I could, the ones that were in the 1st class, one ball player, Tony, and some of these other guys who had the history, like the first athletic director went in, the guy at the award wrestling Woodruff Henley, they inducted him. So I could live with that. But that 2nd year, and them 5 people they put in there, I figured I should have been one of them. But then I was thankful to make, go in the next year. So it's an honor, you know what I mean, to be inducted. And for me, especially having graduated in 1963, and the people on that committee are not my peers. They're people who finished school far after me. And then since then, they have the University of the District of Columbia and Washington Tech. They got players who played at those two places. You see, after they merged, you all know that history. So being a DC teachers guy and getting in there, it was a good, honor. I felt. I was just teasing about second year, but
You tell the truth. You tell the truth.
So I see you're a co-founder of DB Cares. What do they do?
Okay, the DB Cares is a component of DB Consulting Group, Inc., which is a company that my son and I founded, who's an inactive member of the chapter, but he is a member, And we do government contracting, uh, informational technology, cybersecurity, satellite archiving, those kind of contracts. And to give back to the community, our headquarters is in Silver Spring, Montgomery County. We sponsor the health fair every year. And I don't know if you know Silver Spring, you know where Silver Spring Convention Center is, right there off of Georgia and I think Spring Street. And we had all the services, you could get the blood drawn, you could get, all the kind of things. We had food and the county exec, so always were there. The legislators were always there. It was a big deal. And we made the investment as a give back every year. So that's what DB Cares.
This is an interview of Mr. Maurice D. Wright by Clayton Felder. Mr. Wright was initiated into the Beta Rho chapter in 1966. He served as Promarch of Boston Alumni and served in many official positions in the fraternity.
In any protests involving civil rights or the civil rights movement?
Yes, I have. I'm from that era. So when the Civil Rights Voting Act was passed in 1965, I was a sophomore, almost a sophomore in college, freshman. And yes, we had demonstrations in the South, in Carolina, lunch counters, voting rights, you name it. And we still should be involved in that because a protest is always very powerful. Some of you don't like organize and protest peacefully. And I had to learn how to be a student of nonviolence because we were following King and others who did not believe in violence, but we had to figure out how to do that. And being in Boston, I got introduced to another level of discrimination that they had going on here with the schools. Anybody who's been to Boston knows they can be tough everywhere, but when people say they want to avoid discrimination, I ask the question, where are you going to live? They say, I want to live where there's no racism. Where's that? I'll go there. You can tell me where it is. But you can't, people are not going to be able to tell you that. And you can't, and it's not about that. It's like living in harmony with other people. The world's not all black, the world's not all brown, it's not all white. You just got to get along with people. And that's the primary thing you have to do. We all have that consciousness, but if that consciousness doesn't advance you, what good is it? So I think that's the civil rights movement is people act as if it's a passe. We're still involved in the civil rights movement today. See what's going on with the Asians out in down in Georgia. We have to be concerned about the Asians too, because that's just another group of people that are recognized and been spat upon because somebody said they're not who they want them to be. And I don't ascribe to that philosophy. I know the one thing, it's funny how the older I got, the more things I remember my father and mother told me that I didn't pay attention to. But I shared with some young people recently, something my father said to me. He said, Maurice, do not be a victim of somebody else's stupidity. I'm not a victim. And as a dark-skinned brother, my life was sometimes very interesting in terms of how people responded to me, because we still have that. There's a book you should read called Brothers Two. It's called The Cast. I just finished this book with my book club. And what it does, it sort of lays out for us how we as men of color are in a caste, because even the frat is a caste of sorts. They used to do the caste with skin color, hair texture, this, that, and the other. And we have to really work against that, because we want to be inclusive of everyone. And we also want, I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing in my class, but here, we also have to understand that we need to allow each other to have or to differentiate our own caste system, okay? So I was influenced by Southern parents from South Carolina and Georgia, grandparents from Barbados, and you figured that out, okay? Frank knows about that. And if you ever said to my grandparents that you didn't want to go to school or you didn't want to learn, they would slap you in the head. You just didn't talk about that. That's a have to do. Being educated is not something you want to do. My father also said, you don't bring that street talk into our home. It belongs out there. The only English we're speaking here is cash English. English that will get you a job and put some cash in your pocket. Okay? You want to be with your kid, your friends, and you go out, take that outside. Don't bring it in here. You know, so I'm telling you that you don't have a choice about becoming educated. I'm not saying you have to go to a Ivy school like Brother Griffin and get all those fancy school degrees, but I am saying you need to have a skill set that will impress someone enough to give you a job, right? You understand that, right?
Yes. So
you sound like my grandson Aiden. He says yes. I like how you do that because you're defining your answers. No, it's either yes or no. It's not nay or I think so. You have to know so. Okay. And so I had that experience too through the frat. I'm a professorial lecturer at Bentley University, Boston University. And I've enjoyed that because I get a chance to give the younger people my experience through education. And you also can learn from people. You know, sometimes I'm just figuring out, where am I? You know, I gotta be able to turn on this computer and get Zoom focus and set everything up and get the stuff going. It's a lot for an older brain. But, you know, use your resources. That's all I'm saying.
Okay then. So, you mentioned the book The Cast, and it got me wondering, do you happen to have a favorite book?
I have a lot of favorite books. My favorite book is the Bible. I go to that for all kind of responses in my life. I can always find something. And that's a big book, but guess what? You should start reading it if you don't already. And I never had any excuse because my mother said, you don't have to read a chapter, just read a verse a day. You'll catch up. And that was good advice. And I have, the other books I have a library. I'm staying in my library now. I have lots of books. I think books become favorites, but also books kind of like the Malcolm X autobiography of Malcolm X. Books mean different things to you at different periods of time in your life. They take on a different meaning. You could read a book 20 years ago and you read it 20 years later, it takes on a different meaning. So you should find a favorite. I have a favorite book. You find the favorite book, favorite poet, favorite authors. You know, I still like those favorite movies that you did back in the day that were Black films when we finally discovered ourselves, and that's what we did. You sort of latched onto something that was of interest to you. But it's time for you now to get a favorite book, and follow the author and have a discussion with somebody older for interpretation. And I always tell younger people, and I tell older people, it's my job to help you interpret the world. Not from my perspective, but I want to know from your perspective as well. Because your world is not my world. We're in the world together. You understand that?
Yes.
Yeah, right. because you see it a certain way and I don't see it. I fight my nephew all the time. He's 32, and we're worlds apart because I'm laughing because sometimes he doesn't understand me, and I understand him, but it's a lot of work. I have to really be patient because he's not getting it. He said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "What's wrong with you?" because the world is changing. You know what I mean?
This is an interview of Mr. Charles Parker by Brandon Brooks. Mr. Parker has both a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master of Science degree. He served in the U.S. Air Force as Lieutenant Colonel and works as a telecommunications system engineer.
Well, that's a broad question. I was in college I went to college in 1958, I think it was. So I was in college doing most of that. And remember now, I graduated from college in 61. So during the civil rights era, I basically was an adult. And I'm not sure when you think the civil rights era started. We had a civil rights law that was passed in 1957. We had some laws passed with the military in 1949. So there's been a lot of civil rights era. And I think you really talk about the Martin Luther King era, are you not?
Yeah, basically the Martin Luther King era, yes.
Well, I think every Black American in America was affected by that somehow. And particularly if you were living or anyway passing through the South. For example, in 1963, I was stationed at Keesler Air Force Base, Biloxi, Mississippi. And of course, the civil rights law had a big change of that. Believe it or not, in that era, the city bus that ran on base, you had to get off and get in the back once you left the gate of the base. Now I know that's kind of hard to believe nowadays, but that's the way it was. So those changes came about, affected everyone. I don't think, broadly speaking, that most Americans have been affected by the civil rights era, because we're still in that era to me, because as we approved by the Black Lives Matter, systemic racism has been going on for a long time. So everybody been affected by it, whether it was some particular period of time in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or now in the 21st century. That's still a continuum. And I think we are continuing seeing that some of the continuity of our democracy has been faulted because we haven't given everyone an equal opportunity. That was kind of broad answer, but I know you wanted a pretty specific, but I just don't think there is a specific. It's a pretty broad statement, a pretty broad time in everyone's life in America, at least Black Americans in life. Go ahead.
So you say that you believe that the civil rights era is still going on. How
Yes,
do you
sir.
believe change that you can be able to make it come to an end in a sense where we actually have our civil rights?
Well, we're continuing making changes. Today, in fact, on tomorrow, Congress will take up House Rule Number 1, HR 1, and that's to protect voting rights. That's a part of, if you would, our civil rights. There are some discussions that are going on, of course, about the same kind of thing being done in the Senate. Yesterday, we had a discussion about the new Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights, who, by the way, is a Black woman, and the things that she wants to accomplish in civil rights. So, just again, broadly, there are a lot of things that are happening in America today. That's abroad. You've been reading, of course, about the things that happen to Chinese Americans, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders, AAPIs, and they're having their problems. The systemic racism isn't just Black Americans or African Americans. That includes other groups also. The Asian Americans, of course, you're finding out more and more about them. The Jewish folks, of course, always had their problems. So systemic racism is a problem in America. How do we defeat that? I'm not sure. And I don't think there are any simple answers for that. It's going on and we need to continue to work for it. I think the work of the Black Lives Matter folks this summer or last summer, which was kind of curtailed by the coronavirus, had a lot to do with opening the eyes of America to where we stand in the for civil rights. And you realize that during the 4 years of the Trump administration, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights was non-existent. And there is of course, President Biden has nominated a Black woman to take that job. And of course, she has quite a bit of experience in civil rights. So I think we'll see a lot of changes going on. And let me just digress 1 minute. One of the big problems we're going to find is voting rights. And I think as of the last reading, there are 252 new laws being passed by various states to somehow curtail or suppress voting. And that's going to be something that is going to be going on. That fight will go on for quite a while, because as you know, the Constitution gives the states certain rights when it comes to voting. So how do you curtail that? Well, you got to prove that they are being discriminatory, da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's going to be a long fight. So it's still going on, and you'll see different vestiges of it in different ways.
I absolutely agree. I believe that it is a fight that is still going on because we really haven't gotten that safety that we were promised, and we're still fighting for that to this day. So I absolutely correct on that. So one thing that when I was looking through your bio, one thing that I was looking for was when you joined the Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated, and it says that you joined in 1958. So far, what have you learned from your time being a Kappa brother?
That's an interesting question. I'm retired military, right? So I've been a Kappa all over the world. One thing I found about being a Kappa, I think that there is a societal connectivity that you get by belonging to fraternity. What do I mean by that? I mean, I could probably go to any city in most states in this union and some places overseas like Germany, Korea, etc., and find Kappa brothers who welcome you in and give you if you would, a foundation for what you're doing. I have been on vacations. I have been all over the world and managed Kappa brothers, and it's always been a pleasant, very pleasant to belong to a fraternity like Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity and have some foundation when you meet another brother to kind of give you some guidance, provide you some background, and lend you a helping hand, if you would, in that, in wherever you are as a member of this fraternity.
Alpha Psi.